Stunning reasons why couples stop communicating after a few years of marriage. Hi friends, welcome to Marriage Realities, a comprehensive relationship channel. Today's video is all about the reasons why couples stop communicating with each other after a few years of marriage. It is not that you completely stop talking with your spouse. You do communicate with your spouse. But strangely, you talk only about important family matters with your spouse. Your interaction with your spouse is almost always about payments, your children's future, installments, and about the financial future of your family. Of course, talking about important family issues is very important. But when your communication with your spouse is always about dry family commitments, there's nothing exciting in it for you. Before your marriage, your communication with your spouse is exciting and thrilling to you. You had so much to talk with your spouse. You talked with your spouse about your happiness. You also talked about your fears and apprehensions with your spouse. You shared your problems with your spouse as you knew that he or she will instantly support you. How nice it would be if this sort of communication continues after your marriage also. But strangely, after a few years of your marriage, you seem to have nothing to interact with your spouse. You're taken aback when you have to search for topics to converse with your spouse. It is as though you're in dearth of topics to interact with your spouse. You're not alone in feeling so. This happens in many marriages. You do not intentionally stop communicating frankly and openly with your spouse. You do want to share all your feelings with your spouse. But something holds you back from interacting with your spouse as freely and openly as you did before your marriage. Renita, my classmate from my college, paid me a surprise visit. Needless to say, I was very pleased to see her. I lost my touch with Renita after she was married to a successful businessman. Naturally, we had so much to talk about. Renita had an extraordinary sense of humor and kept me in fits of laughter with the jokes and comic timings. We were thoroughly enjoying ourselves. As we were having a rollicking time, her mobile suddenly rang. It was her husband. I was surprised to hear the tone of my friend's voice turning sober and serious while she was talking with her husband. Her voice was abrupt and curt. I assumed that her husband was asking her about some payments and my friend was tersely telling him that it was taken care of. My friend was in the mobile for hardly 5 minutes before she hung up. I was confused by the attitude of Renita towards her husband. My friend had so much to talk to me but seemed to have nothing to talk with her husband. Why was she behaving so? My friend is one among the many couples who feel that interaction between them after marriage should always be about family matters and problems. And it is common to see couples seated together without talking with each other. The other day, I went to an eye hospital for my yearly checkup. An affluent-looking couple entered and occupied the seats. They were within my view. And until the time I was there, they never exchanged a word. The husband was busy with his mobile while his wife looked straight ahead with a bored look in her face. This is a common scene you see everywhere. In the airport, in the bus terminal, in hospitals, just about everywhere. Why does this aversion to interact with your spouse happen in your marriage? During your love days, you do not have responsibilities towards each other. You also have no real commitment towards your spouse. Before your marriage, you had no family duties. So, you had no responsibility towards your spouse, only love. When there are no responsibilities thrust on you, you feel carefree and happy-go-lucky. When there is carefreeness in your relationship, you enjoy being with your spouse. And when you enjoy being with your spouse, you have so much to talk about. In the initial days of your marriage, your responsibilities and commitments are still unknown to you. So you're more like lovers when you're newly married. But after a few years of marriage, it is commitments all the way for you. And you feel cornered and defeated by the magnitude of your responsibilities. This was not what you expected to happen in your marriage. You thought that your breezy love days would continue after your marriage also. But nothing of this sort happens in your relationship. You're left gasping with the loads of responsibilities that literally bulldozes you. You become answerable to your spouse. Your spouse also seems to have changed. As days go by, you realize that your married life is a huge responsibility to you. It is not as fun-loving as you assumed it to be. You're overwhelmed by the procession of responsibilities and duties you have to fulfill in your married life. Slowly, the interaction between you and your spouse becomes spaced and to the point. You're disappointed as your spouse reacts with vengeance when he or she feels that you're lagging in your duties towards your family. It is as though a dividing line has sprung up between you. You're unable to interact with your spouse as freely as you did before your marriage. But strangely, your interaction with your friends remains friendly and frank. You present a different jovial picture with your friends. You have so much to talk with your friends. You show your jovial and fun-loving side only to your friends. But with your spouse, you keep your mouth tightly clamped. And whatever conversation you have with your spouse lacks the spirit of love and excitement. Whenever we talk, we invariably fight. It's a common complaint from couples. This is a wrong way to live your married life. You must understand certain simple factors of marriage. You will think differently from your spouse. You will have a different way of looking at life. Your attitude towards life will be entirely different from your spouse. Since your upbringing is different, your values also will be different from your spouse. This is the most natural thing to happen in your married life. Nothing to feel apprehensive about. These diversities happen to almost all couples. When you take these differences too much to heart, you will only feel alarmed that your spouse is not at all suited to you. In your confused mindset, you feel that your spouse has lost his or her love for you whenever he or she argues with you about family matters. You too are not ready to listen to the views of your spouse. And you become resentful when your spouse has his or her way. As your resentment against your spouse grows, you gradually stop interacting with him or her. Both are wrong in taking your family issues too much to heart. Family problems will always be there. And you will definitely differ from your spouse in looking at it. This is a common scenario in almost all marriages. Unless you learn the art of accepting the differences of opinion that exist between you as part of your relationship, you will feel depressed that nothing is working out in your marriage. How exactly should you communicate with your spouse? Do not always talk about family issues with your spouse. It will only make both feel tensed and keyed up. There are so many enjoyable things to talk with your spouse. Interact with your spouse about sports, politics, family gossips. Remember your love days. Tease each other without being hurtful. Be indulgent towards your spouse. Being indulgent makes you overlook the minor faults of your spouse. Display the love you have for your spouse openly and frankly. Accept that your spouse will be different from you. Acknowledge the hard work of your spouse towards your family. Keep interacting with your spouse. Frank and loving interaction between you builds up your relationship. Apologize instantly when you're in the wrong. Appreciate immediately when you like what your spouse did. Share your fears and apprehensions with your spouse so that he or she feels your partnership in everything. Overlook the hurting words your spouse spoke in a spurt of anger. Accept the apology of your spouse without restarting your fight. Never take your spouse for granted. Share with your spouse whatever you might have experienced in your workplace. When you keep communicating with your spouse, it clears many misconceptions that might otherwise creep up between you. Feel happy that you have your spouse with whom you can share your secrets and worries. Make your spouse your best friend on whom you can rely on, with whom you can smile, with whom you can feel comfortable, with whom you can laugh, and with whom you can talk about anything in the world, and with whom you want to spend the rest of your life with in love and sharing. Did this video make you understand that communication with your spouse is a wonder medicine to solve many of your relationship issues? Marriage Realities will have many such relationship eye-openers. Subscribe to my channel to understand your marriage in a new light. Press the bell icon for updates about my latest relationship videos. Make love forever until death do us part your relationship goal.